Ladies and gentlemen, we back, and I'm telling you, we're back with somebody that's a heavy hitter. I'm excited for this conversation because the person I'm about to introduce you to, you already heard the intro. Marshawn, the one and only Miss Godfidence, Miss AKA Believe Bigger, is on the show today. What's up, fam?
Hey, I'm glad to be here. I was just bragging on you before we started. I'm like, everything's all professional. I'm like, bro, let me have that camera. Let me hold that for you for just a minute. Let me see that nice camera with that nice lens and the nice layout. I just love seeing Black excellence in motion, and I appreciate the chance to be here.
Hey, I'm excited for this one because I know, so many people that's listening to this episode are going to walk away with some crazy tips. But I know the squad, I know the community right now. They're on Google, they're going through the show notes, they're clicking the links, trying to find your Instagram handle. Take us back to like the Marshawn growing up. Like, tell us a little bit about, where you from and a little bit about how you got to this point right now where you are.
Sure, where I am from, the country of Texas, technically considered a state, but most Texans consider themselves an independent entity for some reason. And what's interesting about where I grew up in the suburbs of North Dallas is that I grew up during a time in the 80s where it felt a lot like integration, not as extreme as it was in the 60s and the 50s and all of that, but it was the first time that my white teachers had had Black children in their class. And by children, I meant me, my brother, my friend Kim up the street, and maybe one other boy, little boy named Ashton, that they kicked out because they labeled him early. And there was a handful, literally one handful of Black kids in the entire school. So that really defined a lot of my childhood of finding myself, finding where I fit in, being labeled a problem child, being told that I talk too much, did fine in school, but always had those citizenship grades. Weren't doing too good. Had my name on the board. For those of you who don't know what a board is, there was a time. There's this stuff called chalk. And there was this board that the teachers used to write on, and you would get your name on the board and you get a check and then another check. And by the time you had the third check, you would likely be in the principal's office. Well, I understood the check game and always tried to ride that line between the first and the third check, depending on the teacher, depending on which point you would get sent to the principal's office. And so most people are kind of surprised to hear that now when they know that I've been on The Apprentice, I've been in the Miss America competition. I was third runner-up to Miss America, won talent and interview, went to Georgetown for law school, $200,000 in academic scholarships, and have gone on to build a successful company. I had a previous company managing NFL and NBA players. I published 2 books with 2 of the biggest publishing houses in the world. So most people, actually no people other than my mama, one of my teachers in the 5th grade, Mr. Eager, and my dad, my family, but nobody would have anticipated this other side from how I started. And I think the thing that I'm most passionate about now is helping people truly to believe bigger than what they've been through, who they were told that they were supposed to become, and to redefine, regardless of where you're at in your life right now, who it is that you want to become, because it's likely who God has always intended for you to be. So that's kind of a little bit about my background. Texas is, an interesting space, but now I live in Atlanta, and it is awesome to be around other people who look like me, to see Black excellence, to see Black wealth normalized. But I have kind of an interesting view of childhood now about, I wonder what would have happened if I had grown up with this also as my normal.
Mm. So when you say, grow up with this, as your normal, let's tap into that. Do you think if you had seen, Black people look like you and I, right, commonly every day living a different type of lifestyle, how do you see that impacting, the way you may have grown up, right? You said you were only 5 Black children in the whole entire school. Like, how do you see that impacting what the Marshawn we could be talking to today?
Well, the Marshawn today, I think, is pretty amazing. I have to give myself credit. What is that where Snoop went up and he gave an
Yeah,
acceptance speech and he
I
said,
like
I
to
want
thank
to thank
myself.
me. I want
Yeah.
to thank myself. Now, I really thank God. I'm a believer in the Holy Spirit. I'm an unashamed Christ follower. But I'm grateful for who I've become with what I've been through, and carrying the legacy of the women, the generations of women who went before me who didn't have the opportunities. So I have done everything I believe that I can with what I have. And I'm grateful. I mean, I have became a millionaire in my early 30s. I'm not ashamed of where I am, but I just wonder if I didn't have to deal with, I'll take you into my classroom when I was in the 4th grade. And I remember my history teacher, a woman, Miss Sanders, having a conversation about the presidential election where Jesse Jackson
Yeah.
was running for president.
Yeah.
I was 9 years old. My nephew right now is in the 4th grade and he's 9 years old. And I'm thinking at the time, I remember when she told the entire class that she wasn't ready for a Black president. And so this is our history teacher who's conditioning the audience, I'm a business owner, I think audience, who's conditioning the kids in the classroom to determine what is normal. When she says that, I'm the only Black kid in the entire classroom. She's not ready for a Black president. That is subconsciously and consciously minimizing the very nature of my existence and people who look like me, and saying that we are a risk, we're dangerous. That was taught in the classroom.
It's crazy.
And then the first thing we learn in the classroom about people who look like us in traditional education is it's like our history began with being enslaved. I don't even like to say that we were slaves, we were enslaved. There's a difference, right? There's a difference. We were stripped, genocide actually created, and there were things that happened to us that has been, even the idea of the narrative of us being told that we were once slaves. We were never slaves, ever. That's not our birthright. That wasn't our beginning. That was an atrocity. That was a choice of enslaving people. And that's how we were taught. And so, this woman in 1988 would say she's not ready. And she would teach that to the young minds who are the people that you're working with in the cubicle next to you, because they were in the same class, right? Or they're leading these corporations, or they're deciding policy, and they're saying, we've come so far along. They don't even realize the subconscious. I don't think anybody else in that classroom will remember the moment she said it, but the brown girl who was in the classroom, who was wondering, well, what does that mean for me? And who am I? Do I matter? What would have happened if she had taken a different approach, if she had the mind to be able to be a different person, to be able to take a different approach? I don't know what that would be. I don't know what that would have been, but I do wonder, what if?
Like, let's talk about this, right? Like, when we talk about people placing limitations, right, on us, right? We talk about people placing limitations on us, and how important is it not to let someone's thoughts, someone's ideas become your reality? Because there's a lot of people, and even people who are in that classroom with you, who may have heard that, right? And maybe they became, something that they should not be. Maybe they didn't believe in themselves. How important is it to block out that noise?
I think that focus is incredibly important. Focus is the most important skill you will ever gain in your life. Part of that is being very cognizant of both your eyes and your ears. What are you watching? What are you paying attention to? What our kids watch matters. There are things that I believe I was able to become because of things that my parents did not let us watch. So for people who think it doesn't matter, I see my peers and where they are not. I see the casualness of their televisions when they were kids and when they were children. I see the things that they were allowed to do because their parents wanted to be friends with them, or they didn't understand the importance of putting your kids in leadership opportunities, anything that you can give your kid like, there are things that it matters who we're around, it matters what we see, and it matters what we hear. It matters. It develops a certain ability to be resilient when you're around something and you see something that is less than the standard that was created for you in terms of a level of expectancy and normalcy, where you expect more and you expect bigger. You expect a level of integrity. You expect that your friends aren't going to ask you to do drugs. Like, you just expect that. So when they do, you don't really feel the pressure. You understand that you're seeing something that's beneath you.
Mm.
So this starts early for sure. But in terms of how does it determine who you become, I don't think many of us have been equipped realistically to become who we could be.
Mm. Yeah, you
Many of
tapping
us
into
haven't been
something.
properly equipped to become who we could be. Now, you can't control, you can't change your past decisions, and you can't control people who made decisions that were not in your best interest. You can't control much of your path up to this point. The parts that you could, you shouldn't let that be something that holds you back, because you're responsible from today forward. Especially now, you're listening to us and we're inviting you into a new version of yourself, which is the person you've always been. And you just maybe haven't met this future version of you yet. Now, other people will tell you who you should be, and largely it's based off of who they believe you can become because of who they were afraid to become.
Mm.
Soak it in
Tap
for just a second.
Yeah, tap it in. We might have to repeat that for somebody right now. That listen, like, hold
I
on,
could say it the
rewind,
same way, I'm
rewind.
not sure. But most people give us a version of their vision for ourselves, right? The version of their vision for you is based off of what they believe is possible and attainable, largely driven not by wisdom, but their own wounds.
Mm.
So we pick these careers, we pick an educational path, we make choices in life about our careers, about our relationships, about our friends. And all of that largely is based off of who we believe we were good enough to become, based off of who told us what we could achieve, what we could experience, what was appropriate. I write about this in my book, Believe Bigger, in the 5 stages of the purpose journey. And the first stage is called the discovery stage. This is where we learn the do's and don'ts of life. We each end up adopting these different rules. My rules might be different than yours, and yours might be different than mine, but we all have them. But it's it's the season of life also where we get shoulded on. Here's what you should do. Here's what you shouldn't do. Here's what's
Mm.
appropriate. Here's what's good for a good girl, for a Christian girl, for a what the media says you should do, what your parents say, what your church says, what your friends say. All of these different influences, we're sponges. And so this is where we basically form the foundation of our inner compass for the rest of our lives. And it's been based off of what other people modeled for us or made available to us, often hiding from us things that maybe actually worked, and not necessarily we don't always recognize that a lot of what's passed down as wisdom is really just wounds passed down, where people are perhaps trying to prevent us from experiencing the level of frustration, um, disappointment, that they did. So they want to pick a safe path for us. And I'll just say this last thing. Many of you have heard your parents say to you, you want to get a good job with benefits.
Mm. Tell them.
Well, many of those who came before us, that was succeeding. That was you got to remember, history was not that long ago.
Not at
My
all.
parents used segregated bathrooms. My grandparents had, had third grade level education because that was all that was available. My dad had to pick potatoes. He said he never picked cotton, but he had to pick potatoes because there was still in the South, in Georgia, vestiges from sharecropping, right? Still left over. This was not
Crazy.
that long ago. So the idea of being able to get a job where you didn't have an opportunity to really have a quality job was considered winning. So it's not that the people who came before us who gave us this advice, it's not that they didn't mean well. They just didn't come from a place where they had an opportunity to experience abundance. So they gave us survival as a success strategy.
Oh man, you coming early with the bars. Survival as a set strategy. I think people right now, right, they're saying, okay, I'm getting this. The things are clicking. But my question is, okay, how do I overcome that? So I've been living in a house. My parents have been telling me these things. People before me have been telling me these things. Maybe perhaps, like you mentioned when you were in school, a teacher or even a coach placed those
Yeah.
things on them. Like, how do they overcome that?
Yeah. I'm really grateful for my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Eager. I was about to get in trouble again. I said something smart in class, and he actually called me out into the hallway, which I wasn't a foreign experience for me to be asked to step out of class. And he had this face that I had seen many a time where he was frustrated, again, mad at me. I was used to adults, what really my teachers, and really was just used to white adults always being mad at me now that I'm thinking about it. And I was ready for the normal response that I was used to getting. And then something changed in his countenance and he softened and he said, you know, you can be more than you think you can if you first think you can. And that was a massively important defining moment in my life. It was the first time that someone other than my parents and other than someone in a church environment had told me that I mattered and that I didn't have to experience this. It was my normal, but I didn't have to experience it. So I want to say that to whoever is listening. You don't have to continue to experience anything that you don't want to experience. Everything in your life, especially as an adult, you allow and you invite. I'm not, you know, we all have circumstances that put us in a position, but I just want to let you know that God desires the things that you desire. The Bible says in Psalm 37:4 that God gives us the desires of our heart. And what the word desire in its root word, deseo, means of the Father. If you can come and just dare to believe bigger to a point that your life actually does matter, that you are an extension of God's actual DNA, that your life is not your own, that you have something that is important and necessary inside of you. And if you don't believe that, you can borrow my faith for right now. If you can believe that and recognize that even just having the desire for more means that you have the support of all of heaven behind you. And that to me is just the beginning of a shift. I always say in all of my coaching programs that every life shift begins with a mind shift. I'm going to say that again. Every life shift begins with a mind shift. It is a core principle that I teach in Believe Bigger. And it is the shift to believe that you're worthy, that you matter, and that your desires are also divine is part of the way that we begin to at least give ourselves permission to now deconstruct all of the dirt, all of the stuff that no longer belongs. And as you were talking and asking this question, I thought about there is a part inside of the book Believe Bigger where I walk you through how to go through and look at what are the things that you learned that you need to keep to take you into this next season, and what are the things that you need to recognize that were maybe good then, but they're not going to be tied to your greatness. What got you out of Egypt, right? Many of us got out of whatever circumstance that we didn't want to be in. But the question here really is, school's over, now what, right?
Yeah.
Like what's next?
Yeah.
What got you out of Egypt will not necessarily get you into your promised land. And so walking you through this 3-step process of how to identify here's the hardest part. What's the hardest part? Is that some of these things are going to completely deconstruct your actual identity and understanding of yourself. And if you're not willing to do that work, you don't really want what's next.
Not at all.
You don't really want what's next, because it's not easy. It's not pretty to shed the parts of you and to actually go through the process of not learning, but unlearning.
I love this conversation because I think it's really about, like, when you believe bigger, the first thing that comes to my mind is, you got to place a bet on yourself. One of the things that really caught my interest is that I was reading in a book about Arthur Guinness, the guy who, has the Guinness World Records, has like the Guinness, brewery, the all those drinks, all those different things. He did something back in the 1700s, which is crazy to me. Before he got the money, before he got the fame, the accolades, he spent he didn't spend, but he signed a lease. Check this out, Marshawn. He signed a lease for 9,000 years. Where are they doing that at? Right, so he signs a lease for
the lease isn't even up yet, right?
He signed a lease for 9,000 years. That shows you how hard he was willing to, like, bet on himself to make sure that this thing worked. And I found out later on that I think around 1980, that someone came and they reorganized the contract, reorganized the terms, and bought it out for an undisclosed amount. But that leads me to the question that I want to ask you. Is how important is it for people to have such a big belief that they're willing to, like, really bet on themselves and think bigger?
Well, so let me just say what believing bigger actually means and define that, because I think it can mean different things to different people. But BIG is actually an acronym that stands for built in God. I believe that only God can make what God has already made. So there is, if you look in Genesis, God actually already prepares things for us before we enter into it. He prepared Eden before there was Adam and Eve. And then he actually says, I made them in my image, male and female. And he says that before Adam is actually brought up from the dust. So he says it, he speaks it, he intends it, he's created it before we actually even see it. And so if it's built in God, that means it's built in the unseen realm first. So we need to see what God sees. To believe bigger means to think with the mind of God, the way that God sees it. It's not about actually experiencing more for yourself. It's believing at the level, in the frequency of the mind of God, where miracles and provision are already taking place. It's an alignment. It's an invitation to alignment. And with that invitation, it comes with responsibility for activation. So one of the things I've been teaching on lately is that concept of belief and doubt. What you believe, you build. What you doubt, you delay. And belief always is actually signified, and the trademark of belief is actually in what you build. If you're not building it, you don't really believe it. So to believe bigger means to believe beyond what you've been through. When I wrote this book, Believe Bigger, I was really this was afterwards, but I wrote it to kind of, so what did it really take for me to build a multi-million-dollar company?
Yeah.
Faith-centric, Bible all day, while we talking about massive influence, massive income, and the understanding of what asset you have as the Holy Spirit. Like, people see this other side. What did it really take? Most people didn't know that the start of this business started for me in finding out that my fiance was cheating on me 6 days before my wedding.
Oh, snap.
Our wedding, the wedding. So think about 6 days before. It was a Monday morning before a Saturday wedding. Dress is paid for. The venue is paid for. The invitations are out. People have their non-refundable plane tickets. I got a rehearsal dinner at Diddy's restaurant because I used to manage NFL and NBA players. Made the manager at Justin's more money than he had ever made in one night, including all of the parties and the stuff that all the big celebrities had thrown.
Crazy.
And all this is in place. And I find out while my fiance is on the plane coming from Chicago to Atlanta for wedding week, where as soon as we get off the plane, he gets off the plane, we're supposed to be meeting with the final cake taste testing and meeting with the wedding planner to go over some final details at the host hotel. That's how close everything is.
That's crazy.
So I call the wedding off. The details are in the book. It's actually a really good book. It's a good book.
Man,
I'm going to leave you with a little cliffhanger because I'm a sales girl too, right? So it was the reinvention of finding myself and actually figuring out, how did I, Georgetown trained, admitted to the Supreme Court, I'm on CNN, I'm on Fox Business Channel. This is, right when Barack was running, and I was doing commentary about his run for the White House. And on the other side, I'm doing sports commentary on Sports Center. I got my clients doing the same thing. So this is a really great season of life. And how did I, in all of my education, in my lifetime of a walk with God, and in the idea that I make good decisions and I'm a good judge of character, and all the decisions, I was a pretty straight and narrow woman and teenager and young adult.
Yeah.
So how did I end up here? This doesn't happen to someone like me, but it did. And there was a part, this is what I mean when I say that understanding that your life is not your own. This is where you have to actually have a morsel of belief that you really do matter to God. And I had this question where I asked God, on West Peachtree, for those of you who know the streets of Atlanta, one of the busiest streets in Midtown, in the city, and I'm leaning up against this luxury vehicle that he purchased for me, and now I can't afford because I closed my sports business down. That was the fastest growing women-owned sports agency in less than a year. I had signed the highest paid defensive end in the NFL. He had signed a $62 million 7-year deal as my first client, and then I signed Rolls-Royce as my first corporate client, and then Nike, and then PepsiCo. And I didn't know then that I had a gift for high net worth clients, blue chip clients, but also for big corporations and deals. That was just my first experience in real business. And I'm leaning up against this car on West Peachtree, this luxury vehicle that I can now not afford. And I asked God, why did this happen to me? And he said something that was very interesting. And I want you all to hear this. He said, you're going to be able to change the lives of women like never before. And I was like, couldn't you have just sent me a memo? Did it have to be this public? Did this have, and all the people who couldn't get their tickets refunded or didn't want to and just wanted to support me, instead of having that rehearsal dinner at Justin's, which is Puffy Diddy, whenever he's going by, at his restaurant at the time, they ended up coming in. We had a I Love Marshawn dinner basically instead. Now people are getting ready to go home. I asked God, why did this happen? He whispers this to me. I didn't know what he meant, but I knew he meant it. And this was really the beginning of a mind shift and learning how to believe bigger than what you've been through. So I just want to give some context of this phrase, believe bigger, because we live in a social media infused, superficial, airbrush society.
Absolutely.
Where it's like you can have a bigger car and you can have a bigger business and you can have a funnel that does all the things. All those things are not bad. I believe it. I like nice stuff. I like nice stuff. There's nothing wrong with nice stuff. I don't want to have raggedy stuff. That's just a value of mine. It's not my desire to have raggedy stuff. Okay. So you can have a judgment about it one way or another. However, I believe in having an eternity impact first and foremost. And to really believe bigger means you believe B-I-G in a way that is built in God, that you are stretching yourself to align with the mind of God, with what he's always intended for you, because this is where we really become earth shakers, life changers, and we invite people who are genuinely suffering. I don't care what your bank account says. People are genuinely suffering, whether it's got a zero without any commas associated with it, or whether you got the commas. People are genuinely suffering, because I know the real conversations I have with entrepreneurs and those who are aspiring and trying to figure out where they belong in life. The DMs that I get are when women are expressing to me that they were ready to take their life and they read about Believe Bigger.
Wow.
So I just wanted to give a definition of what it means to believe big, because we look at that in a very give me, bless me more, as opposed to make me more. Make
Powerful.
me more, so that I can pour out in a way that forever changes the destiny of somebody else. And that creates a ripple effect.
It's crazy, man. I mean, yeah, guys, you don't cop this book, you just missing out at this point. She gave me all the
I got to send you a
cliffhangers.
copy.
Yeah,
I got to send you a copy. It's got a woman on the cover, but she's pretty good.
Yeah, let them see it, because we got the YouTube popping too. I need you to put the book back up. Guys, make sure you
It
cop
actually
this.
sold out this year in hardcover. I released a devotional called 100 Days of Believing Bigger. And it sold out a year's worth of books in 14 days.
Yeah.
And what that did, it's interesting for those of you who are authors, is it reignited the sales of my book, Believe Bigger, where the hardback sold out. And it's available in paperback, ebook, and Audible. But it's just very interesting how whenever God breathes on something, it can bring those things that you thought were maybe you're done with that, or it's just kind of leveled out. Yeah. Whole new life, whole new world, whole new level of activity and momentum.
I like it. And it's like, when you start walking in your purpose, and what I like about your story is that, you have all these accolades, all these things that you're doing very well. And then something happens in your life that kind of reshapes your focus. And it was so crazy. Somebody that's listening to this right now, it creates a new narrative, but also shows people, the true reason why you're here. You're impacting way more lives. Like, you're impacting way more lives. For somebody right now that's listening, I want to ask you this question, because we've asked, everybody that's ever been on this platform, that's ever been on our show, we asked them one question at the very end. And that is, if you were that college student getting ready to graduate, perhaps, you didn't even graduate at all, fam. You just dropped out. You didn't get no degree. You're asking yourself the question of the podcast. School's over. Now what? What advice would Marshawn give?
I think regardless of what you've majored in or minored in or thought you should have done, I think everybody should learn business. And I don't even necessarily mean formal business. I think everyone should actually learn entrepreneurship. I think it should be the most normalized thing that we teach our kids. I think the worst question we ask our kids is, what do you want to be when you grow up, versus asking, what do you want to create? So what I would say in wherever you're graduating from, if you've come, what I would say to I would say I did this because I just didn't like working for people. I was like
Facts.
having my own money. Like with my cousins and my brothers, I was always a lender. I cannot actually remember borrowing money from anybody. Um, I actually didn't take out a loan. My parents did for my college education, a small one, because I got mostly scholarships, no loans, no, I should say no federal, like nothing based off of aid, right?
Yeah.
And when I got to a point after college, I think I paid for law school 100% on my own at Georgetown at $50,000 a year.
Ooh.
Had some scholarship, but I paid my way through law school. And I didn't even realize then that I was coaching. I was helping Miss America and Miss USA contestants, and then politicians, professionals, and then later professional athletes with public speaking. Today we would call it branding, but back in the day,
Yeah.
that's not what we called it. We called it communication. So my first company was called Communication Counts. And even before that, in sixth grade, I put up flyers to teach cheerleading to the third, fourth, and fifth graders. In junior high, I was always teaching. I was a competitive baton twirler. I competed internationally, and that was my talent, where I won talent also at Miss America. I was the feature twirler, the sole feature twirler at Texas Christian University. And I would always teach what I already knew. Now, that today is what I teach other people how to do, but I didn't know that this was in my DNA from the time that I was in the fifth grade, right? Fifth and sixth grade.
That's
And
tough.
so I was always wired to say, what have I done? How can I teach other people how to do it and get them to pay me for it? I mean, I was doing marketing. I created my own flyers with crayons and markers.
Oh, that's next
And
level.
I took it to the same principal that was used to seeing me in the principal's office for getting in trouble, and I asked if I could use the laminating machine because I knew they had one, and if I could hang the flyers up. And he let me do it because he said no one's ever asked for help with anything having to do with the business before. And he let me use the laminator and I don't remember if I wasn't allowed to advertise at the school, so we never posted it. But I did put my marketing plan in place. So what am I saying? I think that one of the things everyone needs to do is to integrate entrepreneurship as normal in their kids, but also in your own life. And the easiest way to start is not with a Facebook ad, not with a funnel, not with a website, is just go teach somebody what you've already done and accept a monetary remuneration for that. That's how you start with something. Even if you are good with your hands and you've made something and people are complimenting you on it, sell it. Like, look, I started another business line, an e-commerce team. I just taught them today. So maybe why I'm a little bit wired,
I
because I
love
talked
it.
to them about follow through and finish and completion. And I said, successful people are known by completion, not what they start, not impressed with your start. Nobody else is. It's only about what you finish. But I end every single session with what my husband, who has a background in sales before he stepped into TV and all the stuff he does now, I end every session with go sell something. So that's the simple thing. Just go sell something. Don't make it so complex. Don't get caught up in all the social media hype. People were selling stuff before there were funnels.
Tell them it ain't always about that funnel. It ain't always about that ad spin. What are you doing now that someone is already noticing that you're good at? What I like to about your story is you find out what you did early at a young age that people were just astonished by because you're tapping into that gift. Marshawn, I appreciate you for being on the show, bringing so much value, getting our audience to not only think about leveling up, but most importantly, believing bigger. So I want you to tell people right now, just give them your social media handles. Where can they find you? What's coming up next? And how can we stay in touch with you?
Thank you. So thank you for this conversation as well and for the invitation to be here. So you can connect with me at marshawn.com. That's Marshawn. Marshawn.com. If you click a button there called Start Here, and it'll probably be in the show notes, but you can get a free life class from me. And I always think that anything that I offer in a structured format that's free is a gift, because I started a high-end coaching company. I decided I wanted to be the Rolls Royce of coaching early on in 2010, so that women of color, and women of color of faith could see what it meant to operate at the highest of high levels. So my programs are between $15,000 to $50,000. And this is a free course, a free opportunity. There is no upsell associated with it. It's just a pour and a seed back in, although I have no problem with upsells. And then lastly, if you're interested in the Believe Bigger movement, content, training, really wanting to figure out what's your purpose, what's your path, what's your gift, how are you maybe blocking yourself, how have you identified with an outdated version of yourself, and what is waiting for you. You'll learn the difference between purpose and calling and assignment, and your gifts and your voice. You'll understand what that means, and you can get all of that at believebigger.com. So marshawn.com, believebigger.com. You can get the book, also the devotional. I recommend you get both together if you're serious about your spiritual life and also your entrepreneurial success as well. So school's over. Now what? I think that you're what? Pick yourself. Pick yourself. God already picked you. You should too.
Man, listen, I love this episode, guys. Make sure you tap into those resources. Make sure you grab that book. This is definitely something that you gotta have in your collection, but most importantly, you gotta apply this knowledge once you get it. You heard those ticket prices, and you gotta know that a lot of value is coming from it. Marshawn, we appreciate you, and for those of you that have been listening, always remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it. Hey, what's up, fam? Thanks for watching. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button, smash that like button. We'll see you next week here at School's Over Now What. And always remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it.